Greetings of the day to all the learners of BCom, where we are studying Indian Economy course. Today we will talk about the topic of globalization. This particular topic of globalization is a part of the LPG reforms which took place in India in the year 1991. If you see most of the economies of the world, we need to understand this particular concept of what globalization is. So, in today's discussion, we shall concentrate on what is globalization, what does it comprise, that means the components of globalization. We shall talk about the stages of globalization, in what way does it happen, why should it happen or why should it not, the pros and cons, what drives globalization, why should countries of the world go global, so the drivers of globalization. And we shall talk about if a country intends to globalize, what routes or what modes of entry are available to them and what impact does globalization have on India. So, these are the points of discussion that we shall have in today's session. Coming to the concept of globalization. Globalization is nothing but integrating a domestic economy with the rest of the world. So, how does a country talk about drawing themselves close to the world in terms of its commercial operations is globalization. So, not only commercial but also expansion of social ties between the country also leads to globalization. So, movement towards expansion of economic and social ties between the countries through spread of corporate institutions and where the world shrinks in economic terms is what is globalization, which means the shift is towards more integrated and more interdependent world economy in terms of business and in terms of social ties as well. Now, when you say globalization, what does it actually comprise of? Globalization comprises of two things. It has got two components to it. One is globalization of markets and another is globalization of production. When you say globalization of market, we are talking about growing economic integration between the countries of the world and growing interdependencies between the countries of the world. So, we are dependent on country X, they may be dependent on us for supply of goods, rendering of services. So, that is your globalization of markets, where you have growing economic integration and interdependencies of the countries of the world. When you say globalization of production, it basically means the tendencies of the company to find suppliers of goods and services from locations across the world. So, it is not selling in another market or getting from another market, but you are talking about locating suppliers from across the world so that the advantage of natural differences can come to the world economies. Because you see, each one of the countries in the world are bestowed with some of the natural factors which are called as endowments. So, when a particular country is endowed with a particular factor, either naturally or acquired by them, they are superior in utilization of that factor for production. So, we other countries of the world can acquire that particular factor from them. So, for globalization, this is called globalization of production. So, globalization has two things, two components to it. Globalization of market, where we are talking about economic integration and interdependencies, and globalization of production, where tendencies of the companies to locate suppliers across the world is being prevalent there. So, globalization of production and globalization of markets. Then you have stages. How does this process of globalization happen? Firstly, the company should have a domestic market presence. So, for example, if I start a company in India and I want to go global, then first of all I should have a strong holding in my own country. That is the first stage, which is called as the domestic stage. So, market potential here is explored within your own nation, and you have home production and marketing facilities are also located in your home country only. So, in globalization, as learners, you need to understand two terms. One is called as a home country and another is called as a host country. When you have production and marketing located in your own country, the country of origin, that is called as a home country. For example, we in India, we do lot of exports in terms of spices, in terms of pickle, in terms of clothing. Now, we are a home country to all the companies which are producers of pickle or spices or tea cultivation or manufacturing of clothing. This is a home country for them. Now, if they want to set up an MNC in a foreign country, or they want to let out franchising rights to somebody in a foreign country, that country will be called as a host country. So, you have these two concepts of what is a home country and host country. Now, in the first stage of globalization, which is called as the domestic stage, your market potential is limited. Production and marketing facilities are located in the home country only. That is the first stage. Second stage is international stage, where you talk about exploring going outside the national boundaries of your country and exploring the markets across the national boundaries. So, here you basically talk about exporting. So, you have many Indian companies which actually don't have offices or don't have an MNC company in a foreign country, but they are having operations here in India only, and then they do export. So, this is an international stage where export will increase, and the company usually will adopt something called as a multi-domestic approach, where they enter into more than one country. So, leaving your country, you are selling your product in country A or country B. This is a second stage, internationalization stage. Third stage is multinational stage, where the company can start having their production as well as marketing facilities in other countries. So, stage 1 was what? Company is in India only. You have marketing and production facilities in India only. So, that is called as stage 1, domestic stage, home country. Second stage, Indian company exporting to 2 or 3 countries outside. So, still production is in India only, home country, and export is happening. Third stage is Indian company, production and marketing in India. They also start production and marketing in some country X or country Y, where you call it as a multi-domestic approach. So, here your firms which are there in these countries, because you have established a production facility and a marketing facility, so they will take care of producing and selling in those countries. This is called as a multinational stage, where you talk about you're having production facility and marketing facility in more than one country. So, leaving your country, you have it in other countries also. The last stage is the one in which the current world currently is in, which is called as a stateless state or a global stage. So, you are not confined to the boundaries of your own state. So, it is called stateless. So, you are not confining it. So, therefore, the stage is global there. So, global stage where the corporations actually operate in a truly global environment, making your product available across countries of the world, acquiring resources from different parts of the countries of the world, making the best use of the opportunities which are there at the lowest possible cost. So, you weigh the costs and the benefits and then choose to enter a market or not to enter a market. So, these are the 4 stages of globalization: the domestic stage, international stage, multi-stage, and lastly the global stage, through which globalization can take place. Now, when you say globalization, as in the beginning I said, it is not only integration of the economies but also social ties between the country, which means that globalization simply doesn't mean a commercial activity of earning profit, but much more beyond that. So, let us see in what all forms can globalization happen. The first form of globalization is economic globalization, where you are integrating the world economies by removing something called as trade barriers. When countries of the world trade with one another, there are certain barriers which are being imposed, some of them called as tariff barriers, some of them called as non-tariff barriers. More of the contents on the same would be presented in your courses which are related to your international business. So, here we need to understand that economic globalization means removal of trade barriers which are there and going in for a liberal economy where you don't have restrictions and countries of the world can freely do business with one another. That is the first type of form of globalization. Second form of globalization is cultural globalization, because the world is an assimilation of different cultures, different value systems which are spread across different countries, each country having their own culture. The moment you say globalization, countries of the world also learn about each other's culture, and then they adapt themselves to the cultural diversities of different countries. So this is your cultural diversification. So no doubt you are doing business, but at the same time there is also cultural exchange which is happening between the countries, and this is being done through communication, tourism, television networks. So basically your media, marketing, communications and tourism will play a role where you talk about cultural globalization. Most of the countries of the world are also being able to earn a lot of revenue on account of cultural globalization. For example, in India also, we started having the campaign of inviting foreigners to visit culturally rich heritage sites in India. So therefore that is nothing but a part of cultural globalization, where the tourism department has taken the initiative with a tagline of Atiti Devo Bhava, and we are inviting foreign tourists. So this is a part of cultural globalization. Then you have globalization, which is political. Political globalization is in terms of integrating the world economies into oneness of ideas, norms and value systems, where you have exchange of ideas on common issues which the world is facing. For example, child labor, human rights, human trafficking, drug abuse. These are the issues which are facing the entire world. So therefore, you have organizations which are working towards each one of these issues, and then countries of the world are collaborating with one another in order to have these issues being resolved, or they are working towards these issues. So you call such thing as your political globalization. Then you have environmental globalization. There is a growing concern on globalization where we need to think about the ecology around us. What is the environment around us? What kind of impact is our actions having on the environment around us? What kind of an impact are the company's actions having on the environment? So the world now is coming together to talk about environmental issues. We have recently seen the COP climate exchanges which have happened, the conferences which have happened, where India also participated, in terms of ozone depletion, carbon emissions, biodegradability, packaging reforms, emission rules. All these are all to talk about environment. So the countries of the world have come together to take a step towards protecting environment, which you call as environmental globalization. So these are the various forms of globalization. So not necessarily that it only means economic exchanges, but cultural exchanges between the country, political globalization and issues on environment are all a part of your globalization measures which are there. Then you have what are the benefits of globalization, pros and cons of globalization. So you have people who support the concept of globalization, we basically call them as globalists, and people who oppose the concept of globalization are actually anti-globalists. So there was a write-up which was given by the Center for Study of American Business, which actually spoke about why should globalization happen or why should not there be globalization. So firstly, it says that when globalization happens, we as consumers, individuals as consumers, we have more products at our choice. So we can choose out of plethora of products which are available to us, not only from Indian companies but also foreign brands which will come to India. So that is a benefit that we as consumers have got. But then this benefit is at the expense of the poor. So that is a disadvantage which will happen here. Then when globalization happens, employees have got a greater future in terms of their growth. But at the same time, there is also an issue which is related to cultural diversity. So when you have MNCs which transfer their employees from one place to another in terms of globalization of employees, you would have the employee taking a lot of time to do adjustment in a culturally diverse environment. So that becomes a drawback there, where cultural diversity takes a lot of time for employee adjustment in terms of. Then you have issues which are related to environment, where resources which are needed to address environmental issues are easily being made known to people, and awareness is being created among people through globalization about environment. But at the same time, it also exploits ecosystem. There is more of pollution which is there on account of globalization. So the environmental damage is greater when compared to the environmental safeguard on account of globalization. That is the point raised by anti-globalists who say globalization is not necessary. Then globalization also, people who favor globalization, they say that human rights are upheld when globalization takes place, because freedom of expression, political freedom from whatever are your respective countries, so human rights are being upheld. But people who oppose globalization, they also say that human rights are violated and profits, people are ignored at the cost of profit. So profits are being made and people concept is being ignored. Free speech is also not being given to individuals when globalization happens. Those are some of the issues which they talk about. Nevertheless, when we say our country going in a global landscape, it is very necessary that some of the minor disadvantages which are there are being overlooked at, and then the major benefits which come are being reaped in terms of globalization. Now, why should these countries of the world go global? Because earlier you would say that stay in your country, produce for your country, consume in your country, earn revenue in your country, give back to your country. But now you talk about the world, produce for the world, sell for the world, be a world citizen or be a world consumer. So what is this which is driving all these issues of globalization? Basically, globalization drivers are competitive, globalization drivers are governmental, the drivers are market oriented drivers, and the drivers are cost oriented drivers. So you have multiple drivers which push companies and countries of the world to go global. You can basically say competitiveness, government agenda, cost benefits which will come, and globalization of the market which will give more benefits to the consumers. Those are some of the drivers of globalization. Now, it is easy to understand going global, but how does somebody actually go global? If it's an individual, it is different, but how does businesses go global? So how does this actually happen in the real sense? What is the mode of entering an international landscape, international markets? What is the mode of entering? So let us now concentrate on entry modes of international market or international expansion. These are also called as modes of globalization. The very first and the simplest mode of globalization is exporting. Your country's company need not have to go to any other country. Let only your products go. So the products of a particular country is being sold throughout the world. So say for example in India, we sit here and we consume lot of Switzerland chocolates and Italian carpets and German cars. So what happens? All this is being done, some of them through exporting. So those countries have exported and we are importing. Same way, if you see, if you have people who are abroad who are Indians and they are used to drinking tea of Indian origin, the tea cultivators who are there in India, they export tea to the other countries of the world. So exporting is the simplest way of entering into the global landscape. So entry in the international market is happening through export. That is the first one. The second one is entry is happening through something called as licensing. Licensing here means giving away the right to produce and to sell in your name. A company X in a country A identifies somebody in country B and they will hand over the right to produce and the right to sell to that particular person. This is called giving license. So your company is giving license to the other person in the other country to produce and sell products on your behalf. So through licensing also globalization happen. So you are not going and setting up a shop or a workshop or a factory there, but there are individuals to whom you have given license and they will operate on your behalf. That is the second way in which globalization can happen, licensing. Third way is franchising, where you act as a franchisor and the other person is a franchisee in another country. That particular person will acquire rights from you to sell the product, which is a standardized product. That means they should not deviate from what you are actually producing. You have franchising as one of the fastest method of globalization here. You see here in India, we have so many, especially in the food segment, you have so many companies which are working as franchises of companies which have originated in other countries like KFC and McDonald's and all. These are all franchises which are working in Indian landscape. So these companies have entered into India through acquiring franchising rights. So these people have, these companies have given franchising rights to Indians, and Indians are running these stores in India here. So that is also one method of entry in the global market. Then you have strategic alliances. An alliance is an agreement or a contract between two parties. Now when you say strategic is something which is of an executory level or something which is of a prominent importance to a company. So when you enter into a strategic alliance, you are talking about entering into a contract with somebody to do something which is of a greater importance for the company. So here strategic alliance can be either in terms of production, either in terms of distribution, in terms of promotion. Could be anything. We'll discuss in detail a little later. Then you would also talk about entering into the global world through something called as a joint venture. You are a company in India. You want to do operations in another country, say Canada, but you don't want to set up a shop there, neither do you want to give licenses to anybody. So the easiest way that you can do is identify a similar company in Canada and enter into a joint venture with them to start a new company and do operations. This arrangement is called as a joint venture. So a company of origin in a home country and a company of origin in a host country come together to establish altogether a new company. That is called as a joint venture. Or you can also do something called as a wholly owned subsidiary. That means the holding company is there in India and they will set up a subsidiary company in foreign country. For example, Amazon entered into Indian landscape through a wholly owned subsidiary, Amazon India, which is a subsidiary company of the company Amazon. So that's how it works, and it has entered the Indian marketing landscape or business landscape through a wholly owned subsidiary which they have set up here. So you have these as the modes of entry. Now each one of these modes have got again different methods under them. So let us see each one by one. The first one, export, where you talk about intermediaries who are in between you and between the company which is importing. If India is exporting, then there is an importing country, and for that particular importing country there are some people in between involved. So these people can be either in the form of an indirect export or a direct export, or it can be a cooperative export. When a manufacturer is selling directly to the importer who is located in a foreign market, manufacturer selling directly to an importer located in a foreign market, you call it as a direct export mode. This can happen either through a distributor or it can happen either through an agent. So directly the manufacturing company is selling to the importer who is located in another foreign market through a distributor or an agent. Then you have indirect method of exporting, where you are exporting through an agent, you are exporting through a broker, or you are exporting through somebody called as an export management company. They can be a separate company called as an export management company, and they will take care of exports not only of your company but also other companies who are engaging in exports. Or they can be something called as a piggy bank, which is nothing but a non-competitive related group of companies which can come together to do your export. So these are indirect modes of export. So you can have indirect export, direct export, or you can have something called as cooperative export. Cooperative export is one where you have export marketing groups. Export marketing groups are formed in the name of an association which can be performing market research, which can be appointing selling agents, which can be setting prices for exports, which can be allowing uniform contracts, which can be doing cooperative bidding and sales negotiations. These are all cooperative export. So export can happen in three ways. You can have direct export, indirect export and cooperative export. Then you have contract manufacturing, where you talk about what is being outsourced to an external partner. Then you have licensing, where I told exchange of rights. It can be manufacturing rights or selling rights in exchange of a payment. Then you have franchising, where the right between a franchisor and a franchisee to do a total business, or including use of trademarks against a particular royalty. So businesses are being done in the form of franchising. Joint ventures, where company A and B, which are altogether different entities in different countries, they will come and set up a new company. For example, in India, in telecommunication sector, Aditya Birla Group and Irish company AT&T came into a joint venture to start Idea Cellular. So Idea mobile phones, which are there in the telecommunication landscape, is actually a joint venture which is there. Currently, if you see Hutchison, which is working through Vodafone, and Idea, they are again together, which we call as V Mobile Services. So you have a lot of joint ventures which are happening in the form, which is one of the modes of globalization. Then you have strategic alliances, which are there, as I told, alliances between two partners in two different countries to do a particular operation. For example, when you have in India, if a company like Harley Davidson want to sell their automobiles in India, that is their two-wheelers in India, which are very heavy duty bikes, they are actually into a strategic alliance with Mahindra Group of companies, so that Mahindra Group of companies can manufacture trams and trucks for them, which can carry the heavy duty bikes, and they can do distribution throughout the country. So that is called as a strategic alliance, basically for distribution. So you can have like that strategic alliances for different things. Recent companies which are examples of globalization are McDonald's, which has food stores in over 100 countries, HSBC Bank, which has got its banking operations in around 85 countries, Tata Group of companies, which have got Tata Consultancy and manufacturing in different parts of the countries which are there. You have got Tesco Group, which sells food and other items in Britain, Poland, Korea and other countries. Vodafone, which have got phone services, telecommunication in 31 countries, and like that you have n number of companies. You see in Indian landscape also Indian MNCs which are there abroad. You have Infosys, you have Wipro, you have HUL, n number of companies which are there. Likewise, you have got many companies, foreign brands which are operating in India also. To say globalization is the need of the hour, because you talk about India not restricting itself to its local boundaries. We talk about going global. No doubt the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan given by the Prime Minister talks about making India self-reliant, but it does not defeat the fact that India has to establish interdependencies with the countries of the world. So globalization is essential for India to integrate itself throughout the world, and globalization can happen through any one of the modes, right from exporting till owning a wholly owned subsidiary. So in today's session, we have spoken about what is the concept of globalization, how does globalization actually happen, why should it happen, and in what forms does it exist, right from economic to cultural to political to environmental, and what are the things which drive the countries of the world to go global, and what benefits can be reaped through globalization, but at the same time the cautions to be exercised so that the challenges of globalization does not overrule the benefits which are there. And we have also spoken about each one of the modes of entry of globalization in detail, right from your exporting, which has got 3 measures to it, till a wholly owned subsidiary where a foreign company can operate through a wholly owned subsidiary. So that is about globalization as a part of your course on Indian economy. Thank you.